September 26, 2014, the day the 43 from Ayotzinapa disappeared. The investigation of the 43 missing from Ayotzinapa to this day remains ongoing. The government of the time during those years had a close tie with the Mexican organized crime. Unfortunately, the normal school students who were protesting that day crossed paths with military and police forces, overwhelmed by corruption, drug trafficking, and uncertainty that ended up burying their bodies. After an official version trampled by lies, the investigators had to go out on their own, along with the relatives, to try to clarify what happened. To start, it's important to note that this case is massive. Data on assumptions, on yellow journalism investigations and theories that distance the truth from the matter flood reality. That's why we put together this summary with only the most relevant, but without leaving the story aside. With due respect to the relatives of the missing, we begin this report. Before we start, I ask you please, if you are interested in this type of content, which is hard to find on YouTube, I ask you to leave your like below, to subscribe if you haven't yet, and enable notifications. In addition to that, I invite you to leave a comment, either giving your opinion on this video in particular or suggesting future videos. Let's get started. This tragic story began on September 26, 2014. The Isidro Burgos Normal School, coupled with other normal schools, supported social struggles. In that group of students, there were iconic figures such as Lucio Cabañas and Genaro Vázquez. A part of the authorities pointed them out for their various intrusions into street violence, added to a trend that positioned them as close to leftism. The students operated by kidnapping buses to move to various meeting and action points. It's worth clarifying that when one says action point, it simply refers to a march or a protest, since it was proven that none of the boys or girls who participated in this event carried firearms, nor did they confront the public force. The plan was to attend Mexico City on October 2, 2014, to the commemorative demonstrations of the Tlatelolco massacre. For those who do not remember, the Tlatelolco massacre became a powerful symbol against the abuses of Mexico's authoritarian governments. The result was the death of numerous young activists, just before Mexico hosted the 1968 Olympic Games. If you want to know this event in depth, I invite you to watch the video that is on this same channel called The Day There Was a Massacre in Tlatelolco. Returning to the disappeared of Ayotzinapa, the week prior to the commemoration of Tlatelolco, the students had been kidnapping buses and fuel to concentrate them in their school. With the calendar tightening on their backs, 4 days before the event, the federal police forces prevented the students from committing crimes. On the Sun Highway, on September 25th, the students had gone to Chilpancingo in 2 buses and tried to increase the transfer units for the following day, but the local police prevented them. It's worth noting that the police carried out all of this peacefully without any arrests. The students, then frustrated, continued their journey until they reached the city of Iguala. On September 26th, they proceeded with their plans, obtaining new vehicles for transportation. Around 8:15, among all the students, they first took over 2 buses from the Estrella de Oro line, number 1531 and 1568, and then they added one from the Costa line number 2513. They moved in the new vehicles and continued their course, but when passing through the central bus station of Iguala, they added 3 more buses, 2 from the Costa line. The numbers: 2510, 2012, and 2012 from the Red Star line, and the number 3278. Why am I mentioning the numbering of these vehicles? Well, because these identifications of these buses are going to be very important later on when we talk about the different theories and what happened with each of them. Just past 21:20 hours and following the last shot of the 3 buses, they had to abandon the Costa line 2513 when their driver fled with the keys. One of the pivotal moments was when the driver of the Costa Line 2510 resisted during the takeover and managed to notify his superiors and the police. By that time, the nearly 100 Ayotzinapa students were distributed among the 5 buses. Of that 100 young people, only 2 were in their 3rd year and 6 in their 2nd. The rest were kids who were experiencing the first moments of the start of their career. They had started their studies at the rural school that week. Just as they had no knowledge of how the following years and subjects would unfold, they also had no idea what kind of activities they would do, where they were going, or why. But the hardest part of that uncertainty is that they didn't know that half of their classmates were going to disappear that day. Meanwhile, in the city of Iguala, José Luis Abarca Velázquez had been the mayor for 2 years. He had a somewhat dark past, as this former jewelry merchant was accused of being associated with the criminal group Guerreros Unidos, to whom he apparently paid for protection. At that time, Abarca Velázquez was married to Maria de Los Angeles Pineda, who would later have ties with organized crime and the municipality in question. But what does the story of the woman and the mayor of Iguala have to do with all this we are telling? Well, the same night of September 26th, when the buses with the students were heading to their meeting point, Abarca's political party was celebrating the achievements obtained under the direction of Maria de Los Angeles Pineda. The position of director had been awarded to her only because she was the wife of the ruler. It is estimated that that night she planned to launch her candidacy for the mayor's office, as in 2015 her husband would no longer be the mayor of the city. That night, 2 events would come together unintentionally, which history would later tragically unite. But now, back to the topic of the students. It was night, the sun had just set. And after the takeover of the last buses in Iguala, 4 out of a total of 5 vehicles advanced in a caravan. With the city mobilized by everything previously mentioned, the traffic was a disaster, so the teenagers changed their course to the north. The Star of Gold, 1531, led the journey, and by gaining some advantage, it took a different street than the one followed by the Costa Line, 2012 and 2510. The Gold Star continued at 1568 behind everything. The vehicles full of students were heading towards the peripheral ring of Iguala to then continue towards Ayotzinapa. That route, unfortunately, brought them quite close to the mayor's wife's celebration. The driver warned them not to enter that area, but by that time the police had already begun to pursue them. The authorities' idea was precisely that they should not approach the celebration and not mix with the people who were there. The 5th vehicle, the Red Star 3278, was delayed and departed last from the station. Not meeting his companions due to traffic, he headed directly to get to the Chilpanchingo Highway. From this point in the narrative, all the details and everything that happened to the students of the Isidro Burgos Normal School will be narrated. By schedule, hour by hour, minute by minute, so as not to confuse anyone and to be able to cover all the different points of the city. 2140 to 2225, on Juan Alvarez Street and North Peripheral, the municipal police of Iguala and Cocula fire into the air to order the students to stop. And seeing that they don't, they shoot at the last micro taken. Within a few minutes, they manage to stop the 3 buses. Patrol cars cross in front of them, blocking their way, and behind them are the officers who were chasing them. They were completely surrounded. The students got off to try to move the vehicles that were blocking their way and then confronted the police. When the student Aldo Gutierrez Solano struggled with an officer, the municipal police opened fire on him, seriously injuring him and killing his companion Daniel Solis Gallardo with a shot to the head. That was the first attack. At that place, between 2225 and 2250. After a second attack, around 30 students from the Golden Star, 1568, were brought down to the street, forced to lie down on the pavement to then be taken away in different patrol cars. Only 2 young people received medical help. The students who were able to escape managed to communicate with their other classmates who had stayed in Ayotzinapa. They set out in several vans to cover the distance in a short time and thus be able to help them. The bus 1531, which had gotten ahead of the caravan, was intercepted under the Justice Palace Bridge with gunshots and tear gas. They were forced to get off and were taken away in vans with an uncertain destination. The Red Star 3278. The bus, which had fallen behind, was also alerted, and as soon as they knew the location of the arrest, they headed towards the scene of the events, but before they were intercepted by the police, who forced them to get off, pointing them with firearms. The officers kept the vehicle but let them go on foot. None were arrested before the end of September 26th, more precisely at 23 hours. The second convoy of students met with some of the companions who had not been arrested by the police, including those who were on the bus, Red Star 3278. Meanwhile, the students, accompanied by their teachers, were inspecting the place to find their missing companions. The press found out about the first attack. At midnight, they were attacked a second time by a group that suddenly arrived and, according to eyewitnesses, fired without a word. In this attack, the students Julio Cesar Ramirez Nava and Julio Cesar Mondragon Fuentes died. The rest of the survivors had no other choice but to flee through the nearby hills and the houses of Iguala. At that very moment, but in another place, exactly on the Chilpancingo highway, another group of police attacked a bus carrying the members of the Vispones de Chilpancingo football team. The football team players had nothing to do with the previous altercations, but they were still shot at by the police forces. The official statement said that they had been mistaken for another bus of normal school students, and that's why they attacked them. But of course, all of this, from another point of view, means that they didn't even give them a warning. And they didn't allow them to explain that they had nothing to do with it, that they weren't even students, they were just players from a football team. They fired without a word. The team at that moment was on its way back to its headquarters. The idea was to rest after a match, but in this police attack, 3 football players met their death. On the morning of September 27, they found the body of Julio Cesar Mondragon, one of the students killed in the attack. His face had been skinned. This made a total of 9 people killed, 27 injured, and 43 missing. There were official versions, of course, completely detached from reality, and also a lot of unofficial versions that come closer to the truth of the events. The official part was handled by the Attorney General's office and the state of Guerrero. But what did this official version say? Do you remember that we mentioned earlier that the mayor of Iguala and his wife were in the midst of celebrations? Well, according to this official version, the student teachers intended to boycott this event. But what doesn't add up in this version is that the event was scheduled for 19 hours, and the departure of the students from their school was many hours later. According to this theory from the prosecutor's voice, 3 criminals from the United Warriors Association had been arrested and had declared that they had taken the 43 missing to the Cocula dump. There they would have murdered them, incinerated them, and thrown them in black bags into the San Juan River. This is what the media shouted as the historical truth. This pseudo-truth was backed at that time by President Enrique Peña Nieto. November 7, 2014. The Attorney General's office reported that after investigating, they found evidence of a mass murder in the Cocula dump, assuming that the 43 students or their remains were there. Then 3 detainees appeared to declare the same. Press announcements were made affirming the statements, as supposedly, the detainees expressed that the students were killed after police from the municipalities of Iguala and Cocula detained them, to later hand them over to the United Warriors criminal group. By early 2015, this theory still prevailed, and the police forces maintained that several criminals from the United Warriors group had been paid to kidnap these students. And they executed them as they normally executed their other drug enemies. In the year 2019, a video of an alleged interrogation was leaked where one of these people, pointed out as one of the criminals from the United Warriors group, was telling this version under death threats, pressured by the police forces, "Were you stupid?" Yes, because they commented, "Where are they going to take?" "To some houses over there, but those are for the kids. Those houses obviously have been you if you can accompany us, but if they are, where are the damn houses?" Let's see. You're not going to see me? You're not going to see me. Green jokes. With lies as the common currency, numerous marches were held for the 43 missing. Public protests were held in Mexico and in other countries where the president was visiting. The families continued the search for the 43 on their own. Upon receiving a specific location from informants who had witnessed the event, they arrived at a place called La Carniceria on the outskirts of Cocula. They collected a 1 kilo bag of evidence, but the investigators did not send it for forensic analysis. In 2015, the Argentine forensic anthropology team requested to join the evidence investigation, but they couldn't work until the year 2020. Sadly, the evidence collected at the butchery would confirm the identity of one of the missing students. The parents, relatives, and lawyers were doing things on their own and were taking risks by having the different forces hindering the investigations. That's why, given the distrust towards the Mexican government, they formally asked the Inter-American Commission on Human Rights for the provision of precautionary protection measures. This agreement was signed at the end of 2014. Another hypothesis of the case indicates that unknowingly, the students took a bus that was loaded with drugs. More precisely of heroin, which was used by the criminal forces associated with the government. Now, what is striking is to ask whose was the drug that was inside this vehicle. Supposedly, it was from Guerreros Unidos, and the value of the shipment amounted to $2 million. In this way, upon learning that their vehicle had been stolen, they tried to recover it with the help of the military, which of course were collaborating with organized crime. The journalist Annabel Hernandez wrote the book The True Night of Iguala, where this story is told. According to this version, this is why some students were allowed to walk away and others were showered with bullets from all sides. The bus that was shot at was the one carrying the merchandise, and when the officers took out the cargo, several students saw what was happening, and that resulted in their kidnapping and death. The United States Drug Enforcement Agency, hid from the Mexican government telephone conversations between members of the United Warriors cartel, where they talked about the 43 students. After 3 years, the Drug Enforcement Agency shared the information intercepted on 11 mobile phones, which provided key data to understand what happened that night. At the end of 2018, the head of the executive power, Andrés Manuel López Obrador, instructed for the creation of a commission to strengthen the exercise of the right. That the relatives of the victims of the Ayotzinapa case have the right to know the truth? In 2020, José Ángel Casarrubias Salgado, known as El Mochomo, identified as the leader of the Guerreros Unidos cartel, was arrested. He was accused, among other criminal activities, of participating in the disappearance of the students. He was then linked to the crime of organized crime in the state of Mexico. The federal government had a clear link, along with the municipal police, to the United Warriors criminal group. A public apology was offered on September 26, 2020. The president met with the parents of the Normalistas at the National Palace in Mexico City. There, the progress in the new investigation was reported, and López Obrador said verbatim, "I want to offer my apologies and apologize on behalf of the state, because we are facing a great injustice committed by the Mexican state. It is a matter of state. That's why now the state has to repair the damage and has to clarify what happened. It has to deliver good accounts, there has to be justice, and that is our commitment." But were the apologies of a political leader enough? What happened to all the loose ends and the details that investigators still can't resolve? How many apologies are necessary to erase the unspeakable lie of historical truth? The 43 students are still missing to this day. The families are still working on their own to bring the truth about their children to light, and at least they can rest in peace. That concludes today's video. I hope you enjoyed it. Many of you requested this case in the comments. So we decided to go investigate and managed to pull out this report. I hope you found it interesting and that it answered any questions you had about this sad event. If you found it interesting, please leave a like, subscribe if you haven't already, and I invite you to watch other related videos on this channel. My name is Magnus Mephisto, and this was the day that